My name is Nick Astor, the founder and publisher of TriplePundit.com. This is one of our occasional Google Hangouts that we put together with some interesting folks on an interesting topic. Today we're talking about seafood, a topic that's very important to a lot of us. We spend a lot of time talking about sustainability and food in general. Seafood in particular is an issue that's of particular interest, especially given the great deal of pressure that's happening to our oceans these days, from pollution to overfishing to a whole host of problems. But at the same time, seafood remains something that, if done right, can be a very sustainable protein source for the world. And we've got some experts here who want to talk to us about that. So I want to thank Linda Cornish for joining us. She is the Executive Director of the Seafood Nutrition Partnership. And also David Pilat, and I'm hoping, David, I didn't pronounce your last name wrongly. He is the global seafood buyer at Whole Foods Market, one of our favorite grocery chains. And I'm going to let you guys just take a couple minutes to introduce yourselves real quick and tell us a little bit about your background on this issue, and then we'll jump into some questions. And those of you who are watching online, you're welcome to tweet questions to Triple Pundit, to the @TriplePundit hashtag, and we have somebody monitoring that throughout the chat. So, David, you want to go first?
Sure. And you were so close. So I'm David. I'm the global seafood coordinator for Whole Foods Market. I've been selling and working with seafood for, not to date myself, but well over 20 years now. And you know, we all know that fish, seafood, is nutritious. We know that it can be of value, and besides that, it tastes great. But we also know that customers are still, you know, and again, after 20 years of doing this, I would say there's a lot of folks who still either don't know how to cook seafood or are afraid of making mistakes, aren't exactly sure what they want to buy, and that's really why we're here at Whole Foods. You know, we've got, I think, the best fishmongers in the world. You walk up to one of our seafood counters and you're going to meet someone who's knowledgeable about fish, who can help you pick out what you need for dinner that night, and who can help kind of guide you through your seafood journey, whether you're a beginner or an expert.
Mm-hmm. And Linda, tell us a little bit about where you're coming from.
Sure. I'm Executive Director for Seafood Nutrition Partnership, and we're a national nonprofit that's based here in Washington, D.C., and our goal is to help Americans eat more seafood for good nutrition. And there's really a point where we sit at the intersection of seafood nutrition and public health. Our #1 killer in America and the world is heart disease, and eating seafood twice a week can be so good for the heart and brain. And so we want to get that message out, especially during this October National Seafood Month.
Great. So one of the things we were talking about earlier before we jumped on the call, you guys threw out a statistic that said something like only 10% of Americans regularly eat seafood. I'm amazed that it's that low. Why do you think that is?
I'll get started. So the USDA dietary guidelines in 2010 came out with a guideline for us to eat seafood twice a week for the first time. And there's a new dietary guideline that's coming out this 2015 at the end of this year. And the scientific reports still say that only 10% of Americans follow this dietary guideline, and it's to our detriment. You know, the EPA does have data that show that the Environmental Protection Agency shows that the folks that eat seafood are mainly located along the coast or the Gulf region, and it's probably because from our work in the South and Midwest, that mostly folks still remember that seafood is only available for those that are closest to the waters, even though there's great flash frozen at sea technologies now that make seafood available for everyone. And also, I think people forget that there's canned seafood. So I think it's a matter of culture and preference and taste, that if you didn't grow up with it, you just still forget to eat it.
David, is that something that you've seen as well? I mean, do the Whole Foods in California sell a lot more seafood than the Whole Foods in Denver, for example?
Not necessarily. I mean, certainly our coastal stores are really tuned in with seafood, but I think that it's like we were saying, it's customer perception out there, because honestly, you walk into one of our Midwest stores and they're going to have terrific, in the summer, they're going to have great fresh wild salmon. They're going to have fresh halibut from Alaska. They're going to have maybe some previously frozen cod from Norway. They're going to have a full assortment. So I think it's up to the grocers like Whole Foods and others to get the word out there that seafood can be great across the country as long as it's handled correctly and treated the right way.
So speaking of handling it correctly, I mean, I hear you, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you're encouraging folks to eat more seafood, but at the same time, we hear a lot about the situation in the oceans right now, particularly overfishing. There are certain species we're saying, may be extinct in the coming years if we don't properly manage them. Given all of these pressures, is it necessarily the right thing to be encouraging people to eat more seafood right now?
I think it's really about what you eat. So years ago, we partnered with the Safina Center out of New York, and everyone knows the Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch program. And all of our wild fish is rated at Whole Foods, and that's what I think customers want, and that's what you need to look for. So you come into one of our stores, and you're going to see whether your wild seafood is either MSC, which is Marine Stewardship Council certified sustainable, or it may be rated green, which means go ahead and eat all of it you like, or it may be rated yellow, meaning there's some issues, but it's still okay to purchase. And at Whole Foods, you're not going to find any red-rated seafood. And again, I think that's about knowing your fishmonger and knowing your market, making sure that you're not even given the option to buy red-rated seafood.
And Mia, Linda, please jump in.
I do want to share that there's been last decade, there's been a lot of improvement in fisheries management. And so if you take a look at the United Nations World Fisheries Report from 2014, 71% of our fish that's available commercially is at biologically sustainable levels. And so that's improved even from their report 2 years ago. So, we at Seafood Nutrition Partnership can really exist because there's been so much work from sustainability management groups that have been watching the fishery stocks and looking at the sciences of what we can actually take out of the oceans to make sure that there's available fish for future generations. And so I think it's very important to work with your fishmongers at your grocery stores or even with your restaurants, because like as David mentioning, there's different rating systems from Monterey to other agencies, but they change. And for example, last couple of years there was a concern about Chilean sea bass, but now 70% of Chilean sea bass is rated sustainable. But folks still forget that that knowledge, they don't keep up with it, so still think that you can't have Chilean sea bass. So it's really important to work with your grocer and fishmonger and ask questions, find out what's in season and also what's available to really make sure that you get a chance for trying a variety of seafood. And
so catch us up to date there, because I didn't know about the sea bass thing. I didn't realize that had been updated. That's really good news. Tell us, can either of you tell us a little bit about, we talked about Monterey Bay Aquarium's got their rating system, we got the Marine Stewardship Council. What are the other things that consumers should be out there looking for in order to ensure that they're making a decision that's sustainable when they're purchasing that seafood? And the second part, I also want to get into the farm versus wild thing, but tell me a little bit about first, species and location and what should we be looking for out there?
Well, I do want to point out that in the United States, our fisheries are managed by NOAA, and we have one of the best fisheries in the world. And so, when you look at what we're doing in the U.S., it really are a model. So that's one of the first things to look for is, they may not have a rating system, but NOAA is very good at managing our fisheries. And so, but I'll let David talk about the other rating systems that he uses.
Yeah, I would say that's absolutely true. But again, for us at Whole Foods, we want it to be rated either green or yellow or MSC certified. But there's a lot of great seafood in the U.S. that is rated green or yellow, and of course it's governed by NOAA or MSC. For instance, there's a new fishery on the West Coast that is MSC certified, and that's Pacific Dover sole. There's skate out there. There's rockfish. That's a wonderful U.S. fishery. Much of it landed in Oregon, and that's great fish that we're able to get across the country. You'll see that fish in our, in our Portland, Oregon store, but you can also see it in our Miami stores. So there's a lot of great seafood out there. And again, for us, the gold standard really is the Marine Stewardship Council. They're certifying fisheries as sustainable. And then the ratings by Monterey Bay and Safina Center really make it easy to buy wild fish.
Now, speaking of wild, what's up with farmed fish these days? There'd been a lot of a backlash against farmed salmon for a little bit of a while, saying there were some health concerns, some environmental concerns. Has that started to been cleaned up? Are there other fish out there that are being farmed responsibly?
I think there's still concern over conventionally farmed seafood, which again is why you want to know your market and you want to know your fishmonger. Your fishmonger at the counter should be able to tell you, if you're interested in buying farmed fish, well, how was this salmon raised? Somewhere, let's see, I'm going to go way back and say around 2007, we started to look at our aquaculture standards, and we started with farmed salmon. And we now have a responsibly farmed logo at Whole Foods, and our standards prohibit for farmed seafood any parasiticides, pesticides. Net pens may not be treated with copper. We look at the feed, no land-based animals in the feed. They really go quite deep, and then they're third-party audited every year to our standard. So you know, if you're coming into Whole Foods Market, that the farm fish you're getting is, I think, the highest and the best in the industry. But again, your fishmonger where you're shopping should at least be able to tell you where your farm is located and how they raise the fish. And if they can't, I think that's probably a problem, and that's where some of the misnomers and some of the rumors get started.
And Linda, there was also a little bit of a nutritional question about whether farmed fish had quite the same nutritional value as wild fish. Is that still something that people are concerned about?
Yeah, so, also with the United Nations stats on wild versus farm seafood, and of our fish produced now is based from farm fishing. And so
did we lose Linda?
And the nutritional factors really depend on what you feed. Last 30 years of farm fishing or aquaculture has improved significantly. And again, it's back to that knowledge of, people are still remembering back 30 years ago about the practice for farm fishing. And so they really need to get up to speed now on what farm fishing has become. Look for best aquaculture practices. That's another rating system you can find in the grocery store. And also just to look at ASC, that's a sister organization for MSC. They also manage aquaculture as well. So I think it's definitely a factor to look at when you're looking at eating more seafood. And according to the USDA, the rating for farm salmon actually has more omega-3 than wild salmon, and that's based on what it's being fed.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned aquaculture, which is even sort of a more advanced version of fish farming. It can be done, anywhere. It can be done. For example, we did a whole project with some folks in Indiana that were doing trout, salmon, and I think perch. So this could theoretically be done all over in any continent. Do you see that as something that is going to continue to become more popular, and is that something that Whole Foods is buying that kind of fish at this point?
Well,
aquaculture is just a technical name for farm fishing.
Right.
So, but yeah, you can definitely do it in the ocean, on land, an enclosed loop system, and so it's definitely the wave of where we're going in terms of fishing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, aquaculture is growing at Whole Foods. I think when you look at the world overall, I believe last year that it approached or maybe just passed 50% of all fish that's eaten or that is consumed.
Wow.
In the world. In the U.S., I don't think that we're quite that high, but we continue to, we carry salmon from Norway, salmon from Iceland, bronzino from Greece. We have shrimp from Belize, shrimp from the U.S., an Alabama farm. So really, the aquaculture is happening with many species all over the world.
And I want to encourage the listeners of this program to also consider shellfish and mollusks. Oysters are right now a big trend in the U.S. and it's coming back. And it's actually one of the best aquaculture stories because, as you're growing oysters, it also cleans the waters in our waterways. And so, once it gets to a safe level to eat, it's definitely a great way to incorporate seafood. And mussels, one serving has 900 milligrams of omega-3s, and we need 1,750 according to our experts a week. So a serving of mussels or a piece of salmon can get you really close to what you need in omega-3s per week.
Now, you mentioned, so it's great to let's talk about the shellfish, and then David, earlier you talked about a couple species that might not be as commonly known, skate and so on. Another thing both of you told me earlier was that something like 10 species accounts for 90% of our seafood consumption or something like that. Is that the case, and is there a movement on your behalf to encourage folks to learn about other types of fish, experiment a little bit with what's out there?
We're always trying to get customers to try new fish, whether it's aquaculture or some of those wild rated species, whether they're MSC or green, etc. So again, we've got the West Coast skates. We've got different types of scallops these days. We've got shrimp from the Georgia coast. We've got let's see, we've got hake, for instance. That's one that not everybody knows. So there's a lot of species out there. There's new, even new farm species like paiche. So there's a lot of species out there, and I think it's really just about letting customers understand that they're easy to cook, they're not hard to prepare, and sampling. That's something we do a lot at the store. You have to let folks taste it oftentimes before they're going to buy it, and we love to do that at our stores.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Linda, have you seen that as well? Are there other nutritional benefits to species we've never heard of out there that might still be viable for sustainable harvesting, farming, etc.?
Yeah, I think one thing with eating seafood is there's definitely a taste adventure with the seafood that's available within your region, and so just as wine has a terroir in terms of where it's coming from, there's a term called terroir with seafood, and so think about the different tastes that comes from the New England coast or the Florida coast or the Pacific Northwest. I mean, the oysters from each region have a different taste, and so we're trying to really tell the story of seafood from each region, and even around the world. It's definitely a global food, and so people just have to remember to lead with what's available at the grocery store that's been sustainably sourced, and talk with the fishmongers to find out what's available instead of following your recipe. If you have a recipe for halibut in the wintertime, that's probably going to be really expensive because it's not seasonally as readily available. In the summertime, it might be. So really talk and find out, I need a firm white fish, what's available. I want something for the grill, what's going to hold up with my, either gas or charcoal grill. But really find out, kind of lead with what's there at the retail store instead of the recipe card.
So you set it up for me there. This time of year, if I was looking for value and I wanted to put something on the grill, I might look at blue catfish. It's an invasive species out of the Chesapeake Bay. And
yeah.
When you buy it, you're helping the environment, and it was just rated as green. So it's a green-rated fish that we need to get out of the Chesapeake Bay that is moist and flaky and just a great fish to cook with. And again, it's a value fish. So there's some fun fish to try that folks haven't tried that won't break the wallet and that are easy to cook.
Speaking of that, has anyone figured out something you can make out of the invasive carp that is rumored to be about to invade the Great Lakes?
Oh, I'm originally from Taiwan, and carp actually is a delicacy, and so there's a lot of great Asian recipes for carp. So I think there is a market that we just need to connect the fish to.
And so to go back to where we were at the beginning, we talked about 10% of folks really being exposed to seafood and eating it regularly. Have you guys seen some progress in the awareness that you're trying to build? I mean, are we getting to 11%, 12%, etc.? Have you seen that happening, and is there a goal in mind for getting that number up?
So we just kicked off our 3-year National Public Health Campaign here in DC this October, National Seafood Month, and we are starting our work in 8 cities in the South and the Midwest, and so it's a little too early to tell. Our 3 prongs of helping Americans be healthier is to build awareness that seafood is healthy. We've definitely built a lot of awareness by being on national television, radio, and newspapers. We've got a couple of celebrities on board, such as Detlef Schrempf and Captain Keith Coburn. Even the Oklahoma Thunder center Enos Cantor has come on board, as well as Food Network chef Gina Neely. And so we definitely are building awareness. The next step is to build skills, and we have a nutrition intervention program called Eating Heart Healthy, and it's really geared for the underserved. But the questions we get are very basic. How do you buy it? How do you cook it? How long can you keep frozen fish? It's really like any other protein, but seafood just seems so foreign to people. And they're just wondering, how they can incorporate it more, but really they don't want to make a mistake. That's the biggest factor. Is this new food is sometimes maybe $1 serving and up, and they just don't want their families to not like dinner after spending so much time cooking it.
And on our side, I think that the greatest thing we can do, in addition to offering high quality fish and species that cover whether it's value or on up from there. But one of the best things we could do is to train our fishmongers, which we continue to do, so that when a customer comes in and they have that question that we were talking about cooking, how long can I keep this in my freezer, that our fishmongers know, and they really do right now. And we continue to go deeper with our trainings, because we want customers to feel comfortable buying fish, whether it's fresh, frozen, or
So,
I want to point folks to our website, seafoodnutrition.org. There's a number of lots of recipes, but several that are $10 that feed a family of 4. So if you're new to seafood, give it a try. There's a varieties of recipes for salmon, shrimp, mussels, catfish. You name it, and so give it a try. And also there's resources for the consumer as well as the retail counter. And so if you operate a restaurant or need more guide one-pagers, we've got them on our website as well.
Terrific. Back to that question that you guys just started talking about, frozen seafood. A lot of people still have the impression that if you freeze a fish, flash freeze, or whatever the terminology is, you're going to lose a bunch of quality. And I'm curious if that's actually the case. I was sort of under the impression that most of the stuff gets flash frozen at sea anyway. So if you're eating it in San Francisco, it's not actually any different than eating it in Kansas City. It's frozen all the way. Am I right about that?
I would say there's a portion of seafood that's frozen at sea these days, but if not, much of it is frozen as soon as it hits the port. And if you're buying a high-quality piece of fish that's frozen as soon as it's landed, you're not gonna lose nutrition, and you're gonna have a great piece of fish, whether you're buying it, like you said, in Kansas or Florida or wherever it may be. I think we're rapidly helping to change the perception around frozen fish at Whole Foods. We've got a great program right now of individually frozen species. One of our best sellers is a club pack, a 2-pound pack of farmed salmon fillets that sells for $19.99 a pound. You can put it in your freezer, take pieces out as you need them, and not worry about having to get to the store that day. And again, it's become one of our best sellers. We started with it about 2 years ago. We've got everything from cod and shrimp to sole and halibut in this program. And I think folks are again rapidly starting to understand that frozen fish, when you pack it right, freeze it correctly, sell it quickly, can be as good, some people would say better than fresh.
Yeah, I think for consumers, since we have 80 to 90% of Americans that need to eat seafood twice a week, one of the best ways to get started is to have seafood ready when you are, so that flash frozen at sea fish can be defrosted within 15 minutes and be cooked within under 15 minutes, so you can have a quick meal. But if you are new to seafood and you buy a piece of fresh fish, you might feel stressed to eat it within 2 days. But frozen is really a great way, or a great way to go for new seafood eaters.
Terrific. We got a time for about one last question, so I wanted to sort of hear from both of you a little bit about, let's go back to that sort of entry-level person, or a person that might not be going in and picking out fish. What are some of the most interesting species and preparations that folks should be out there looking for that are going to satisfy both the health issue, that 2 servings a week, et cetera, that Linda's talking about, but also to be confident that this is something that's not a pressure species, overfishing, that's something that's a sustainable choice. Give us a few ideas.
I think just to keep things handy, either at work or at home, is to try some canned seafood, and they come. I know we know tuna, but there's salmon, mussels, sardines, and so keep those handy. And a lot of them are actually coming up with new innovations of flavors. And so if you just start with a bed of salad and cucumbers and tomatoes and add some seafood, you've got lunch right there. And then for cooking at home, I think baking either in parchment paper or foil wrapped in, wrap your fish with a little olive oil and salt and pepper, any herbs of your choice and vegetables. Bake it at 350 for 15-20 minutes. You've got a wonderful meal, and you look like a chef. So I think just knowing a few techniques would be great to get started.
Perfect.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say whether you're roasting or any sort of simple preparation for seafood is the way to go, especially for beginners. And I'll go out on a limb and say there's a lot of different ways you can go. You could buy a piece of roasted smoked salmon at our stores, just a 4-ounce chunk. It's ready. It's ready to eat. You could heat it for a few minutes, put it over a piece of salad, or you could just flake it cold on salad, and you'd have a great nutritional meal that you don't even have to cook. So there's a lot of choices out there. Again, when you look in our frozen bunkers at Whole Foods, there's a lot of easy ways to go, whether it's just buying some cod portions that you could take home, thaw, again, toss with olive oil, salt, pepper, roast in the oven. If you want to get a little fancier, you could put some garlic and white wine on there, but it doesn't have to be complicated. I think it's about keeping it easy.
Fantastic. Well, you guys are definitely making me hungry, so I think I may go out and have some fish tonight. Thanks a million for joining us. Special thanks to both of you, and also special thanks to Future of Fish, who helped us put this all together. I think Mara's there lurking in the background. And if you'd like to share this video, it will be saved as a YouTube video on triplepundit.com. You can go there right now and see it. And save it, embed it, do whatever you like with it, watch it later, send it to your friends. We hope to continue this conversation. We're going to be doing 3 more on the topic of seafood over the coming months. Stay tuned at Triple Pundit, and we will give you the details of when and where that will be happening. So thanks so much to both of you for joining us, and we'll do it again soon.
Thank you so much.